For decades, the name Errol Flynn has been wrapped in glamour, the perfect image of charm, adventure, and danger. To millions, he was the daring hero who could outfight villains, steal hearts, and make the impossible look effortless. But behind the scenes, those who truly knew him whispered a very different story, one filled with cruelty, addiction, and scandal. What began as the story of a Hollywood idol would soon turn into a dark, tragic tale that exposed the rot behind the Golden Age's brightest smile. The rise of a Hollywood rebel. Before he became one of Hollywood's most controversial stars, Errol Leslie Flynn was simply a boy from the edge of the world. Born June 20th, 1909, in Hobart, Tasmania. His father, Theodore Flynn, was a respected marine biologist and professor, while his mother, Morel, was known for her beauty and volatile temperament. The young Errol inherited both, his father's curiosity and his mother's restlessness. From an early age, he showed no interest in convention. He hated school, disobeyed teachers, and was expelled repeatedly. Authority was his lifelong enemy. By his teens, Flynn's charm was already his weapon. He had the ability to talk his way out of trouble, and into it again. Expelled from Sydney Church of England Grammar School for fighting and theft, he spent his youth drifting from one failed job to another. He worked briefly as a shipping clerk, a fisherman, and even a gold prospector, but his appetite for risk always overpowered discipline. Those who met him in his early years often described him as magnetic, reckless, and completely unafraid of danger. He was, in every sense, addicted to chaos long before Hollywood came calling. During the early 1930s, Flynn left Australia for New Guinea, where he claimed to have managed a tobacco plantation and hunted crocodiles. Later accounts suggest that much of it was exaggerated or fabricated. Flynn loved turning his own life into legend. Even then, truth was negotiable. But one story was true. He was accused of stealing gold and narrowly escaped imprisonment. The scandal forced him to flee to England, where fate would open a door he never expected. In London, he stumbled into acting almost by accident. He joined a small repertory company and, despite no formal training, impressed everyone with his physicality and confidence. He wasn't polished, but he had something audiences couldn't ignore, a dangerous kind of charisma that felt real. That raw magnetism caught the attention of British filmmakers, and in 1933, he landed his first screen role in the Wake of the Bounty, filmed partly in the South Pacific. It wasn't a major success, but his presence leapt off the screen. Executives at Warner Brothers saw potential and offered him a chance to come to Hollywood. Flynn arrived in California in 1934, broke but determined. Within a year, he was cast in Captain Blood, replacing another actor at the last minute. The film's release changed everything. Overnight, he went from a restless drifter to one of the most sought-after stars in America. His accent, his grin, and his athletic grace made him an instant sensation. Warner Brothers built an empire around his image, the perfect adventurer, the gentleman rogue, the man who could duel with a sword in one hand and steal a kiss with the other. Audiences believed it, critics praised it, and Flynn played along. But deep down, he knew it was an illusion. Off-camera, he drank heavily, chased women, and laughed at the studio's attempts to control him. He was only 26, yet he already saw himself as untouchable. That dangerous confidence would define everything that followed. The same defiance that made him a star would one day destroy him. But in 1935, no one could imagine that the handsome Tasmanian who had fought his way from obscurity would soon become Hollywood's most infamous sinner. A man whose life blurred the line between legend and nightmare. A dangerous man behind the charm. By the late 1930s, Errol Flynn had become the crown jewel of Warner Brothers, the man who could turn any film into gold. But success didn't humble him. It made him unpredictable. With every movie, his ego grew larger than the screens that carried his name. The studios adored the profits, but those who worked with him began to dread his presence. Directors, co-stars, even crew members spoke of a man who could be dazzling one moment and destructive the next. At just 27, Flynn lived as though the rules didn't apply to him. He treated contracts as suggestions and schedules as inconveniences. During filming, he often refused to take direction, insisting he knew the character better than anyone else. On the charge of the Light Brigade, his recklessness nearly caused tragedy. The film's famous battle sequence, shot with real horses and explosives, left dozens of animals injured or dead. And though Flynn wasn't the director, eyewitnesses recalled him mocking safety warnings and urging the crew to make it look real. It was one of many instances where his appetite for danger crossed the line into cruelty. Off-set, his behavior was just as volatile. He drank constantly, bragged about his conquests, and taunted fellow actors who couldn't match his charisma. Colleagues recalled that he thrived on humiliation. He'd charm you to your face, then destroy your reputation behind your back. What made it worse was how easily he got away with it. Warner Brothers executives covered up his outbursts and paid hush money whenever he crossed the line. The studio couldn't afford to lose him, and Flynn knew it. That power turned him into something close to untouchable. He surrounded himself with opportunists, men who laughed at his jokes, women who tolerated his cruelty for proximity to fame. At his lavish parties, he was always the center of attention, a golden boy with a sinister grin. Guests would later whisper about the strange layout of his mansion, rooms designed for surveillance, mirrors positioned at odd angles, corridors that led to hidden alcoves. He didn't just want attention, he wanted control. Every friendship was transactional, every encounter a performance. His relationship with women became especially notorious. Though the studio promoted him as a romantic ideal, Flynn's treatment of his partners bordered on contempt. He viewed relationships as games to be won and discarded. He once boasted that no woman could resist him, a line he repeated so often that even his friends began to believe he meant it literally. Some women left the encounters humiliated, others left traumatized. But in an era where powerful men were shielded by fame, none of it made the papers. Behind the scenes, his arrogance began to isolate him. Veteran actors refused to work with him, citing his temper and lack of respect. Director Michael Curtis, who had helped launch his career, swore never to collaborate with him again after their falling out on the adventures of Robin Hood. Curtis described him as a spoiled child trapped in a man's body, charming, yes, but hollow. Even co-star Olivia de Havilland, who shared undeniable on-screen chemistry with Flynn, later admitted she kept her distance off camera because of his unpredictable moods and inappropriate advances. Still, to the public, none of this existed. In the press, Errol Flynn remained Hollywood's perfect gentleman, dashing, sophisticated, and endlessly heroic. Magazines published stories about his supposed generosity, his laughter, his wit. Fans sent him love letters by the thousands. They didn't see the exhaustion in the eyes of those who worked beside him, or the way his smile disappeared the moment the camera stopped. By 1941, Flynn had everything: wealth, fame, women, and a studio willing to protect him at any cost. But that kind of power always comes with a price. He had built a kingdom where no one could tell him no. And in that silence, the monster inside him grew louder. Those who still tried to reason with him were ignored or discarded. He wasn't just Hollywood's favorite leading man anymore. He had become a symbol of the arrogance and moral decay that lay beneath the glamour. The scandal that destroyed an idol. In October 1942, Hollywood exploded with one of its first major sex scandals. Two teenage girls, Betty Hansen, age 17, and Peggy Satterley, also 17, accused Errol Flynn of statutory rape. The news was shocking. The man who had just been celebrated as Robin Hood was suddenly being called a predator. Flynn denied everything, insisting the encounters were consensual, but the damage was done. The trial, held in early 1943, became a media circus. The courtroom was packed with reporters, and every detail of Flynn's private life was splashed across headlines. His defense team didn't just fight for his innocence, they attacked the girl's character, painting them as immoral and attention-seeking. The strategy worked. After weeks of testimony, Flynn was acquitted. But Hollywood would never look at him the same way again. Even though he avoided prison, the phrase "in like Flynn" entered the public vocabulary, a dark joke about his reputation with women. Warner Brothers continued to cast him in films, but the scandal had permanently shattered the illusion of the dashing hero. He was now a man audiences both adored and feared, a symbol of the hypocrisy that hid behind Hollywood's polished facade. The trial took a toll on Flynn. Friends said he drank more than ever, drifting from party to party in a haze of alcohol and bitterness. His charisma remained, but the sparkle behind his eyes was gone. The scandal had stripped away the illusion and revealed a man consumed by his own demons. The decay of a Hollywood legend. By the mid-1940s, Errol Flynn's once golden career was rotting from within. He was still famous, still working, but his films no longer carried the same magic. His health was collapsing from years of alcohol abuse. His once athletic body had softened, his face swollen and pale. Insiders said he was barely functional on set, showing up drunk or hungover, often unable to remember his lines. He continued his reckless lifestyle, sailing his yacht through wild parties, chasing women, and alienating colleagues. Studio executives grew tired of his antics, but his name still drew money. Hollywood couldn't resist exploiting what was left of him. One producer even remarked, "He's poison to work with, but the audience still buys the fantasy." In private, Flynn's behavior became more erratic and cruel. He mocked aging actresses, bragged about his conquests, and boasted of his voyeuristic games. The people who once laughed at his charm now avoided him. His marriages crumbled, and his reputation sank even lower. Behind closed doors, he admitted to friends that he didn't expect to live long, and he didn't care. "I've had my fun," he said. "Who wants to grow old anyway?" But beneath the bravado, those closest to him sensed regret. The same man who once conquered Hollywood was now a prisoner of his own addictions, haunted by what he had become. He still had flashes of brilliance on screen, but off-screen, he was fading, faster than anyone realized. The final years and the fall. By the 1950s, Errol Flynn was a ghost of his former self. The man who had once symbolized Hollywood's golden charm was now worn down, bankrupt, and exiled from the inner circles of fame. He owed money to creditors, had alienated his wives and children, and could barely secure work. His body was failing. Years of alcohol, drugs, and untreated health issues had destroyed his liver and heart. In 1958, desperate for meaning, Flynn traveled to Cuba to film a low-budget movie. There he met Fidel Castro and shockingly became an admirer of the Cuban Revolution, calling Castro a fine young man. It was a bizarre final chapter for a man who had once embodied American glamour. By then, Flynn's reality had collapsed into a strange blend of fantasy, politics, and desperation. He spent his last year wandering between Europe, the Caribbean, and Canada, living off loans and fading fame. In October 1959, at just 50 years old, Errol Flynn collapsed in Vancouver while visiting a young woman named Beverly Adland, his teenage girlfriend. The autopsy revealed a heart attack, accelerated by cirrhosis of the liver and decades of substance abuse. He had lived fast, lied endlessly, and died exactly as he predicted, too young and too ruined to be saved. In death, the contradictions remained. To some, he was a legend, the embodiment of charm and adventure. To others, he was a predator and a fraud. Hollywood buried him with honors, but those who knew the truth couldn't forget the chaos he left behind. The man who played heroes had lived like a villain. Legacy of Darkness. Today, Errol Flynn's name still evokes both fascination and disgust. His films remain classics: Captain Blood, Robin Hood, The Seahawk. Yet his personal life reads like a cautionary tale of unchecked power. In an era when studios ruled everything, Flynn was their greatest asset and their greatest scandal. His story mirrors the very soul of old Hollywood, a place that worshipped beauty, protected monsters, and destroyed its own in silence. Behind every smile in the Golden Age was someone hiding a secret. For Flynn, that secret became his identity. The actor who brought joy to millions was, in truth, a man consumed by arrogance, addiction, and cruelty. Those who worked with him, from Bette Davis to Hedy Lamarr, saw it firsthand. Yet Hollywood protected him because his charm sold tickets. In the end, his legacy is not just about fame or failure. It's about the price of indulgence. Errol Flynn's life reminds us that talent without conscience is a dangerous thing. He gave the world adventure, but he left behind a trail of destruction. And for many, that's what makes him the most haunting figure of his time, a man who embodied everything both beautiful and broken about the Golden Age. Errol Flynn lived like a king and died like a ghost. His story forces us to ask, can you still admire the art when you know the darkness behind it? Tell me what you think in the comments below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more stories about the hidden truths of Hollywood's Golden Age.